Welcome to the Botany Bistro, where we're serving up bite-sized botany for you to munch on as you savor the science of plants. I'm Mary, and I'll be your botanist today. Our menu includes a discovery of plants in the Fabaceae family. Even though it's quite chilly today, I wanted to do this bistro outside with one of our wonderful Fabaceae plant members. This is Cercis canadensis, also known as Eastern Redbud, and she is one of my absolute favorite plants to see in the wild, to have in our landscape. This time of year, it's a wonderful treat that we can enjoy. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. What makes the Fabaceae so special? Actually, there's a lot. The Fabaceae family, also known as the legume family, can be identified by their characteristic seed pods. These fruits open on both seams and are a common food for many cultures. Anytime you've eaten peas, edamame, or chickpea hummus, you're munching on the fabulous Fabaceae. Another common trait in this family is the structure of the leaves. Leaf shapes vary, but many of the plants in this family exhibit compound leaves, which means that each leaf has multiple leaflets that are usually pinnately arranged, which gives the leaf a feathery-like appearance. The flowers produced by plants in this family are also a good way to identify them, as they usually have a large upper petal and fused lower petals, which creates a zygomorphic or bilaterally symmetrical shape. The Fabaceae is the third largest plant family in the world, with about 750 genera and 19,000 species worldwide. This wonderful Fabaceae plant, the Eastern Redbud, is very recognizable in our region this time of year. She is blooming. She has different colors of flowers that you might see. I've seen white, darker pink. These are more of a lavender purple, but I will tell you that they all taste pretty good. So to harvest these, we just take one of these flowers and munch on it. They're so tasty, very high in vitamin C. They have a little bit of a pea-like flavor, which makes sense because they're in the pea family, the legume family. And so they share some of these characteristics with their other cousins in this family. Now, this tree is just starting to leaf out. And I know I just told you that most of the plants in this family have pinnately compound leaves, but this one is an exception. Of course, plants don't like to read books, and every time we come up with some kind of general rule, there's an exception to be found. But this one actually does have simple leaves. The leaves will come out and be this beautiful little heart shape. This one has green leaves, but my neighbor up the street has one with more of a maroon leaf. So there's some variation that you can find. This native plant is one of those plants that I consider to be a good gateway for people that are considering planting more natives in their yard. It does very well. This tree is only about 7 years old, and it has grown significantly since I first planted it. This area in my yard is a little bit damp, and so I was looking for a tree to be able to soak up a lot of the excess water that kind of settles in this part of my yard. I'm able to see her blooming from several different windows, and it's just a wonderful welcome for spring. This bistro was a little hard to plan just because of the amount of plants that I wanted to talk about today, but I think that I have narrowed it down. We're going to be talking about something very special that this plant family does. Living things need a significant amount of nitrogen if they are going to be healthy. A lot of plants that we grow need to access this nitrogen through their roots in the soil. So the nitrogen that is in the atmosphere is not readily usable for plants. There's a couple different ways that nitrogen gets fixed in our ecosystem, and one of those is lightning strikes. On those really stormy days when we've got a lot of lightning activity, actually that lightning is fixing it and having it fall down to the ground as nitrates, applying fertilizer onto our plants, which is why they exhibit this kind of flush of green growth after storms, in addition to all of the water uptake. What is really special about plants in the Fabaceae family is that they have developed a symbiotic relationship with certain types of bacteria that can fix nitrogen. These nitrogen fixing bacteria, called ribozoa, invade the plant's roots, or I don't want to say invade, it's a symbiotic relationship. So they kind of move in to the plant's roots. They create little nodules. So if you pull up a plant in the Fabaceae family that has formed this symbiotic relationship, you'll see these little nodules all the way down its root structure. Bacteria produce ammonium from atmospheric nitrogen, which is then in turn used by the plants. And as a thank you, the plant offers carbohydrates to this bacteria. This nitrogen fixing capability has been discovered and utilized by agriculturalists for many generations. Here in the Ohio region, we grow a lot of corn and soybeans. Even as a young girl, I would see how these crops were being rotated. And as I grew, I discovered through studies and research that this crop rotation actually was a very thoughtful process addressing the needs of the nutrient depletion of nitrogen in soils from nutrient heavy feeders such as corn. Farmers wanted to be less reliant on chemical and synthetic fertilizers. Farmers began choosing to rotate their crops so that when they have a Fabaceae, a legume plant that is able to fix nitrogen in the soil, such as soybeans, that their crops needed less inputs, less external inputs in order to be healthy year after year. And that's just good gardening practices. So we did talk about in our last bistro with the Brassicaceae, and our special guest Kaimisha was on with us. We talked about crop rotation. This is a really big reason why we are introducing different plants from the Fabaceae, different legumes into our agricultural spaces. You might see plants in the Fabaceae such as vetch or clover being used as a cover crop. Sometimes people call that a green manure. These crops will be planted within different garden spaces, and then they'll be turned into the soil because that nitrogen is captured a lot in those plant parts as well. And so you want to put that back into the soil so that your following crop, whether it be corn or eggplants or okra, are able to accept that available nitrogen that has been fixed through this symbiotic relationship. Another fabulous plant in the Fabaceae that I have growing in my home landscape is a legacy plant that was here before we moved in. It is a mimosa tree. The mimosa tree in my backyard is very large and of course produces flowers that are different from the other flowers produced by many plants in this family. They look like little pink fireworks. These flowers attract many hummingbirds to our yard. Mimosa also has an interesting cousin that is Mimosa pudica. These are the sensitive plants, if you have heard of them. They're fairly small, low growing, kind of a ground cover. And when you touch these plants, they actually will respond to your touch. They will fold up and kind of droop down. That ability is called thigmonasty. And basically what's happening is in response to that heat or that pressure or even a rapid cooling event, the turgor pressure in the specialized cells that hold the leaves up actually drops very, very quickly. It's able to kind of fold in on itself. While we're talking about very unique characteristics of some of these plants, I do want to mention the cauliflory of the redbud species next to me. Cauliflory is a characteristic that is seen in plants where they are able to produce flowers directly from mature bark. You might see this in some tropical species such as cacao, but this is a temperate species that demonstrates cauliflory. And it's very neat to see these little pom-poms of flowers all over. I know I've been chatting about a couple different plants in the Fabaceae without really recognizing the very characteristic plant, which sometimes is the short term for plants in this family, which is just pea family. The pea actually was the subject of some very interesting genetic research done by someone named Gregor Mendel, where he took different characteristics that he could observe about peas, and then he ran through lots of different cross-pollination experiments. He thought about seed texture, whether it was bumpy or smooth. He talked about the height of the peas at maturity, the different colors of the pea flowers. You can have white or pink. Certain pea plants did not follow the exact growth patterns of their parents. And this was very early in the concept of genetics. Working in his laboratory, he was able to discover 3 foundational principles. He chose to use pea plants because of their very quick life cycle. You can germinate a pea seed in a very short amount of time, less than a week typically. Then you can grow it up and you actually can have quite a bit of control over its pollination cycle. He was able to have these very controlled fertilization experiments, hybridization experiments, and then record all of his data. He was able to do this through several different generations so that he could reinforce what he was observing. At the end of his experiments, he actually developed 3 laws that we still use today as we learn about genetics. The law of segregation, which says that traits are determined by pairs of factors that separate during the formation of reproductive cells. The law of dominance, which says that in a pair of factors, one factor, which is dominant, could mask the expression of the other factor, which is recessive. And the law of independent assortment. The inheritance of one trait does not influence the inheritance of another trait. Mendel's experiments are commonly visualized in Punnett squares. Gregor Mendel did not invent Punnett squares. That was Reginald Punnett. People like to name things after themselves. When you see how these crosses work, it's a good way to visualize different probable offspring. The image of the Punnett square with the pea flower color and those different dominant and recessive genes are things that we can all be appreciative of from the humble pea that gave us all of this wonderful information. So I am a big fan of foraging. I love to just go out into the woods and see what's available. So if you are eager to forage some Fabaceae plants this time of year, I just wanted to give you a few tips. First of all, I know that this is a Fabaceae plant. I know that this is Cercis canadensis. I planted it, but also I can identify its different characteristics. Before I harvest or consume anything, I make sure that I've done my research, that I have properly, accurately identified the plant. I usually use 3 different trusted sources if I am new to that identification so that I can be sure that it's the right plant. I understand that not all plant parts are equally edible, and I do my research to determine what parts of the plant are edible and in what stage of their maturity. This plant will produce edible seed pods. You'll want to eat them before they turn brown. So when they're nice and fresh and green, you can eat them. I know that these flowers are edible as well, but you really do want to do your research. I also am positive that this area has not been in contact with any kind of chemical applications of herbicides or pesticides. You want to be cautious about that. But if you get permission from the landowner, you have a positive ID, and you've done your research, they can be a very tasty treat that you can pop into salads to add a little bit of color. We're also going to be seeing the black locust flowers coming out very soon. And one of my absolute favorite treats to find in the forest are honey locust pods. Now, honey locust you'll be able to identify by their thick, thick thorns that come right out of the trunk. Great sign to me that that tree has something tasty to share. It is protecting itself against herbivores, and once you see the size of these pods on these honey locusts, they're quite large. The seeds are quite large, quite hard. You might think to yourself, well, what in the world would have given this tree cause to protect itself so? Well, megafauna, such as mammoths and mastodons, would regularly feed on this species, and they've actually found fossilized remains of these animals that have had honey locust seeds in the remains, and so they know that these were the main seed dispersers of this very large tree. And in between these seed pods is this very sweet, sticky flesh. It almost has kind of a tamarind taste to it. You're able to scour them along the ground and kind of get in there, start working on there, and I chew up a little bit of that wonderful seed pod. It is so tasty. I'd like to send a big thank you to the Hoyt Arboretum for use of their amazing images today. We're so grateful that you came to join us on the Botany Bistro. Stay tuned for more Bistro to Go.